"Mom, your name's not on the list." My son said it like he was reading a weather report, not detonating a bomb in the middle of my granddaughter's wedding. He stood there at the entrance of the Green Valley estate, blocking my way in, his shoulders squared, his jaw tight. Behind him, white floral arches framed the path, fairy lights twinkled on the trees, and soft classical music floated through the evening air. Guests laughed and posed for photos, completely unaware that my heart had just fallen to the floor. "My name is Helen Ward. I am 72 years old and a widow. I raised one son. I buried one husband. And I paid for every single thing in sight." But apparently they forgot that part. My granddaughter, Lily, was the first of my grandchildren to get married. I still remembered changing her diapers, tying her little shoes, teaching her how to make Thomas's favorite rice pudding on Sunday afternoons. To me, this wedding wasn't just a party. It was a lifetime arriving at a single day. I'd spent the whole morning getting ready, taking my time the way a woman does when she knows the moment matters. I chose the soft rose-pink silk dress I'd kept in the back of my closet for years, saving it for something truly special. I fastened my mother's pearl necklace around my neck, the same one I'd worn on my 25th anniversary with my late husband, Thomas. I sprayed a light cloud of French perfume, the expensive one I only used on big occasions, behind my ears and on my wrists. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an old woman. I saw a grandmother who had lived, loved, survived, and still stood tall. I saw someone worthy of front row seats, not the back door. I wanted Lily to see me that way too. For 6 months, my life had revolved around that wedding. My son, David, and his wife, Olivia, had come to my apartment almost every weekend. They would sit on my velvet couch, sip the coffee I brewed, and talk in soft, careful voices. "You know, Mom," David would start, rubbing his forehead, "times are tough right now." Olivia always followed with the same line, a rehearsed sigh wrapped in fake concern. "We just want Lily to have her dream wedding," she'd say, touching my hand. "You only get married once." I was old, not stupid, but I was still a grandmother. I opened my heart first, then my wallet. "How much does Lily's dream wedding cost?" I asked one afternoon. David and Olivia glanced at each other before showing me a glossy brochure. The venue looked like a palace, the Green Valley estate, with its manicured lawns and crystal chandeliers. The catering menu included lobster tails, imported cheeses, and desserts that sounded like French poems. The wedding gown alone cost as much as a small car. In the end, I paid for everything. Over $100,000 wired from the savings Thomas had left me. Money meant to keep me comfortable and help family when it truly mattered. My name appeared on every contract, every invoice, every receipt. The venue booking: Helen Ward, primary payer. The catering: Helen Ward, paid in full. The decorations, the music, the invitations. All of them carried my name. I signed, transferred, and confirmed. I spoke with vendors. I negotiated small discounts. I made sure everything was perfect, not for myself but for Lily. That afternoon I called a cab, clutching my small silver clutch bag like it contained my whole life. The driver, a cheerful young man with music humming softly from the radio, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You look fancy, ma'am. Heading somewhere special?" he asked. I smiled, my chest swelling with pride. "It's my granddaughter's wedding. Her happiest day." "Lucky girl," he said. "Having you there." Thought so too. When we pulled up to Green Valley Estate, the place took my breath away, just like the brochure. White arches covered in flowers framed the entrance. Tiny lights were wrapped around the trees, flickering gently as the sun faded. Guests were already arriving, stepping out of cars in suits and gowns, voices full of excitement. Some of them recognized me. "Mrs. Ward, everything is beautiful. You must be so proud. What a stunning venue." Each compliment warmed me for a moment. Yes, I thought, I did this. For them. For Lily. I walked toward the main gate, my heels clicking softly on the stone path. Near the entrance, David and Olivia stood greeting guests. My son looked sharp in a dark tailored suit, his hair perfectly styled. Olivia sparkled in an emerald dress, her jewelry catching the lights as she laughed a little too loudly. "David, everything looks wonderful," I said, stepping forward, arms open to hug him. He didn't move. His eyes, the same blue eyes that used to light up when he saw me at school plays and soccer games, looked straight through me, cold and flat. Olivia turned slightly away, pretending to adjust a flower arrangement. "Mom," David said, his tone like ice. "What are you doing here?" I laughed softly, thinking I'd misheard. "What am I doing here?" I repeated. "I came to my granddaughter's wedding, of course." He reached over to the receptionist's stand and snatched the guest list from the young woman's hands. The music seemed to dim. Or maybe it was just my ears closing against the humiliation I could already feel approaching. He ran his eyes down the list slowly. Once, people behind me grew quiet. I could feel them watching, their conversations pausing mid-sentence. David exhaled, then spoke louder than he needed to. "Your name's not on the list, Mom," he said. "You're not invited." My smile fell from my face like shattered glass. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "What kind of joke is this?" "It's not a joke," he replied, his jaw tightening. "It's probably some mistake in the invitation process." "A mistake," I repeated. "I was the one who paid for the invitations, David." I helped Olivia double-check the names so no one would be forgotten. Heat rose in my cheeks, burning all the way to my ears. I turned to look at Olivia. She didn't look at me. Her lips curved, just slightly, into something that wasn't quite a smile. More like victory. My longtime neighbor, standing a few feet away, lifted a hand to her mouth in shock. A cousin of mine stared at his shoes, pretending to scroll on his phone. Guests avoided my eye, suddenly fascinated by their programs and their watches. No one said anything. No one stepped forward. I was being treated like an intruder at the very event I had built from the ground up. I felt the humiliation rising inside me like a wave. Hot, choking, ready to drown me right there under the floral arch I paid for. But there is something a woman learns after 7 decades of life. If they're going to strip you of everything, do not let them take your dignity too. So I straightened. I adjusted my pearl necklace with a steady hand and lifted my chin, forcing my gaze to meet my son's cold blue eyes. "All right, sweetheart," I said quietly, every word sharp and clear. "If I'm a mistake, then I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Without waiting for an answer, I turned around. 200 people stepped aside as I walked past, like I was contagious. No one touched me. No one reached out. I walked under the white floral arch I had paid for. I stepped away from the music I had approved, the lights I had chosen, and the celebration I had made possible. The cab driver was still waiting near the entrance, leaning on the hood of his car. "Did you forget something, ma'am?" he asked as I approached. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady but hollow. "I forgot what kind of son I raised." The ride home was silent. The pink silk dress that had made me feel so beautiful an hour ago now felt like a costume for a bad play. Anger and shame sat heavy in my chest, tight and unmoving. They had used me, emptied my savings, and thrown me away the second I stopped being useful. They didn't want a mother. They wanted a wallet with a heartbeat. When I stepped back into my apartment, the quiet hit me like a wall. I closed the door gently, walked to my bedroom, and unzipped the dress. It pooled at my feet in a soft puddle of silk, suddenly ridiculous. On the wall above my dresser hung a framed photo of Thomas, smiling in his work shirt, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. He would never have allowed this. He would have looked David straight in the face and said, "You're no son of mine." But Thomas wasn't here. Just me. I could have cried. I could have called a friend and sobbed into the receiver. I could have swallowed a sleeping pill and tried to forget. Instead, something else woke up inside me, something old and familiar. Not the grandmother who bakes cookies and writes checks. The woman who once ran her husband's transport company for 10 years. The woman who negotiated contracts, balanced accounts, and knew the value of every dollar. I walked very calmly, to the small room I still called Thomas's office. I opened the cabinet and pulled out a cream-colored folder stamped with black ink. Lily's wedding. Placed it on the desk. The humiliation still burned. But beneath the burn, a plan was already forming. I didn't sleep that night. The pink dress lay crumpled on the bedroom floor, a small, silk monument to everything I had allowed them to do to me. The clock in the hallway ticked loud and slow, like it was whispering one word over and over. Full, full, full. But the longer I sat there in my slip and bare feet, the more the word began to change. Not fool. Finished. Around midnight, I walked back to Thomas's old office. The cream-colored folder labeled Lily's Wedding sat where I'd left it. I switched on the desk lamp. Its yellow light spread across the papers like a spotlight on truth. Venue contract, catering invoices, decoration receipts, wire transfers. Every single document had my name on it. Helen Ward, payer. Helen Ward, contract holder. Helen Ward, responsible party. I ran my finger along the lines of ink. My hands didn't shake. They thought they'd locked me out of a party they owned. Legally, I was the host. I hadn't just been a guest they excluded. I had been the owner they humiliated. Picked up the phone. My lawyer, Marcus Hale, had handled our family matters for nearly 30 years. He was there when Thomas and I bought our first house, when we closed the deal on our transport company, when we updated our wills after he died. He answered on the second ring. "Helen," he said, cheerful. "Isn't today Lily's big day? How did it go?" I let the question hang between us for a long moment. "Marcus," I replied, my voice slow and level. "Do you have time to be the best attorney you can be tomorrow morning?" His tone changed instantly. "What happened?" "I was asked to leave the wedding I paid for," I said. "My son and daughter-in-law decided their image mattered more than their mother. I need you to help me fix that." Silence. Then a soft, controlled anger. "I'll be at your place at 9, he said. "Don't sign or throw away anything until I've seen it." "I won't," I answered. "And Marcus?" "Yes. Bring a sharp pen." Hung up. The pain was still there. The humiliation throbbed like a bruise. But underneath it, something solid was forming. Not revenge, not yet, something older. Memory. They thought I had always been just mom and grandma. They forgot I used to be the one who signed paychecks. I sat back in Thomas's office chair and let the years replay in my mind. After Thomas passed, everyone assumed I would crumble. A 62-year-old widow with gray hair and a quiet voice. What else could she do but fade away? Instead, I stepped into his chair at the transport company. For 10 years I ran that business. I dealt with truck drivers and warehouse managers. I negotiated with clients who tried to underpay us. I sat across from bankers in stiff suits and told them exactly what interest rates I would and would not accept. I handled unions, fuel prices, insurance, maintenance, taxes. I made that company worth 3 times more than when Thomas was alive. And then one day I sold it. The day the contracts were signed, David barely looked up from his phone. He only asked one question. "So you're retired now, Mom," he said. "You'll be comfortable, right?" "Yes," I'd replied. "I'll be comfortable." He never asked how comfortable. He never asked where the money went, what I did with it, how much there was. He just assumed I had a modest little pension and a bit of savings. He thought the $100,000 for Lily's wedding was a massive sacrifice. He had no idea it was a generous favor from a woman who could have bought and sold his life 10 times over. That was the real humiliation that night. Not the moment he said, "You're not on the list," but the realization that I had let them think I was powerless. At 9 sharp the next morning my doorbell rang. Marcus entered, coat over one arm, glasses already in his hand. He took one look at my face and didn't bother with small talk. "Show me," he said. We sat at the dining table. I spread the contents of the cream folder in front of him. He read silently, one document after another, his brows drawing together. "Venue contract," he murmured. "All in your name. Catering, florist, band, photographer, dress. All charged to your account. He looked up at me. Helen, legally speaking, you're not just a payer. You are, in every sense, the host of that wedding. I laughed once, bitter and short. The host who was turned away at the door. That's not just cruel, he said calmly. That's humiliating. Publicly. In front of 200 witnesses. He tapped the contracts with his pen. We could sue for emotional distress. We could demand compensation. A formal apology. There's more than enough proof. I looked out the window for a long moment at the kids riding bikes on the street. Somewhere in another version of my life, I would have been at a fancy hotel, having brunch with Lily, talking about dresses and speeches and honeymoon stories. In this version I was here, with a lawyer, holding proof that my own son had thrown me away. Marcus, I said quietly, do you know what I want? A lawsuit is one option, he offered, but it will be exhausting. I don't want a check written with my own money, I said. And I don't want his apology. He studied me. Then what do you want, Helen? I want to stop feeding people who bite the hand that feeds them, I replied. I want my life back. I want my money back. I want my power back. Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. Then we're not talking about just this wedding anymore. No, I said. We're not. I walked to the hallway cabinet and opened the small safe hidden behind a framed photograph of Lily as a child. Inside were 2 more folders. One blue, one gray. I brought them to the table and opened the blue one first. This, I said, sliding the deeds toward him, is their apartment. A 3-bedroom unit in a good neighborhood. Big balcony, underground parking, walking distance to the park. David and Olivia called it our place. Or the kids' home. Marcus adjusted his glasses. The deed is in your name, he said. Of course, I replied. I bought it as an investment right after selling the company. David said rent was too high. He wanted a better place for the kids. I let them move in. No rent, no contract. I paid the property taxes, the building fees, everything. He flipped to the next page. And this second one. The lake house, I said. The one they pose in front of every summer on social media. Our little paradise, Olivia calls it. And this is yours too, he confirmed. Every key, every window, every plank on that deck, I answered. Paid in cash. My name. They contributed exactly nothing. I opened the gray folder. Inside were copies of insurance policies, account summaries, and one very simple sheet of paper. A standing bank transfer. $4,000 every month. To David Ward. Description, allowance. Marcus let out a low whistle. You've been giving them $4,000 a month. They call it help, I said. I call it raising a grown man for the second time. He was quiet for a long moment. Helen, he said finally, what do you want me to do? I looked down at the transfers, the deeds, the contracts. They erased my name from a guest list, I answered. Now I erase myself from their lives. I slid the wedding folder toward him. Keep that as proof. But it's not the weapon, I said. This is. I laid my palm on the blue and gray folders. I want an eviction notice prepared for the apartment. I want the locks changed at the lake house. I want a formal demand for the car returned. And I want this, I tapped the allowance sheet, to end. Today. Marcus nodded slowly, like a general studying a battle map. Marcus left around noon. The house felt different after the door closed behind him. Not bigger, not smaller. Just mine again. On the table lay 3 neat stacks. Wedding folder, the insult. Property folder, the leverage. Allowance sheet. The artery I was about to cut. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and opened the banking app on my phone. The same app Olivia had once waved away with a little laugh. Oh, Helen, this stuff is confusing. Just let David handle the money things, okay? She'd said it like I was a child touching her expensive china. On the screen, the scheduled transfer glowed calmly. $4,000. Monthly. To David Ward. Next. First of the month. Placed my thumb on the screen. One simple button sat at the bottom. Cancel. For a second I saw Lily as a baby, asleep on my chest. I saw David at 8, bringing me a crumpled drawing of a truck saying, "Like Dad's." I saw Olivia on my sofa, mascara running as she said, "We just want the best for Lily." Then I thought of the way he'd said, "Mom, your name isn't on the list." Pressed cancel. The screen refreshed. Scheduled transfer, none. I exhaled slowly. Something heavy slid off my chest and thudded onto the tile floor between my feet. Invisible but very, very real. Next came the lake house. Marcus called that afternoon. "Locks will be changed tomorrow," he said. "Security system installed by the end of the week. Only your key and your code will work. And if they try to go in, yes, it's trespassing. The company will call the police." I thanked him and hung up. They were somewhere above the Atlantic, flying to Paris in first class, probably clinking champagne glasses, taking selfies for Olivia's followers. They had no idea the ground below them was quietly shifting. The next week settled into a strange rhythm. Morning, coffee, emails with Marcus, papers to sign. Afternoon, small errands, walks around the block, a visit to the hair salon. Evening, silence. But not the kind that hurts. The kind that lets you hear yourself again. On Tuesday, I went to the salon and asked Maria, my hairdresser for 15 years, to cut it shorter. "How short?" she asked, comb poised. "Short enough that when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who begged for a place at her own granddaughter's wedding," I replied. Maria met my eyes in the mirror for a moment, then nodded. By the time she was done, a pile of gray lay on the floor, and a lighter, sharper version of me looked back. "New chapter," she smiled. "New book," I answered. On Thursday, I dug Thomas's old car keys out of the drawer, the ones I hadn't touched in years, and went down to the garage. The engine protested at first, then settled into a familiar growl. I drove to the lake house. The security company had already been there. A new keypad blinked by the door. The lock turned smoothly with my key. Inside it smelled like dust and sea salt. No candles, no Olivia's perfume, no scattered toys or abandoned flip-flops. Just our old wooden table, Thomas's fishing hat on a hook, the sofa we'd once fallen asleep on listening to the waves. I stood on the back deck, looking out at the water. The wind was cold, but it felt like a hand on my back saying, "Forward." "Do you see this, Thomas?" I whispered. I finally remembered who owns the shoreline. That night, I slept in the lake house for the first time in years. Not as a guest in my own home, but as its owner. In Paris, somewhere across the ocean, I imagined the first crack appearing. Came on the 1st of the month. I woke early, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and sat in my kitchen by the window, watching the thin winter light spread across the street. If this were any other month, at that exact moment, my bank would be moving $4,000 out of my account and into David's. Today nothing moved. I almost laughed at the simplicity of it. Money doesn't scream when it stops. Doesn't slam doors. It just fails to appear. Quietly, powerfully. Later that afternoon, my old landline, the one only a few people still used, rang once, then stopped. I ignored it. An hour later, my cell phone buzzed. A number with an international code flashed across the screen. "David." I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then another buzz. "Message from David. Mom, are you okay? The transfer didn't come through. Maybe there's a bank error. Me know. Love you." I stared at the words. "No. How are you after the wedding? No, I'm sorry. Just, the transfer didn't come through." I deleted the message without replying. While he was probably standing in some Paris boutique, card declined, cheeks starting to flush with embarrassment, I was at my kitchen table learning how to use my new laptop. I had hired a young tutor, a patient boy named Ethan from the building next door. He wore headphones around his neck and treated me with more respect in an hour than my own son had in months. "All right, Mrs. Ward," he said cheerfully. "We're going to make you a spreadsheet queen." "Careful," I smiled. "I used to run a company. If you awaken that part of me, there's no going back." We spent 2 hours going through online banking, investment platforms, email filters, and cloud backups. By the time he left, I had created a secure folder for all property documents, a digital copy of every contract Marcus needed, and a new investment account my son would never know existed. That night, I poured myself a single glass of red wine and sat by the window. Somewhere in Paris, a waiter was apologizing to Olivia. "I'm sorry, madam, your card has been declined." She would say there must be a mistake. She would whisper to David. He would check his phone. "See no money. Send me another message." The next morning, I woke to 12 unread texts. "Mom, maybe your card expired." "Mom, please answer, this is urgent." "We're at dinner and the card isn't working. Can you check with the bank?" "Mom." I scrolled through all of them, then pressed select all delete. Silence is not always empty. Sometimes it's a complete sentence. Meanwhile, Marcus called with updates. "The eviction filing is processed," he said. "The notice will be delivered on the day they return. The bailiff already has it scheduled." "And the car?" "Yes. Registered letter sent. The building management has clear instructions. If they attempt to drive it out without your authorization, the police will be notified." I thought of David's face when he turned me away at the estate gate. Confident, smooth, certain he was in control. He had no idea control was a thing you can lose in a single signature. On the 10th day of their honeymoon, I drove back to the lake house. I brought a thermos of coffee and an old photo album. The new locks clicked behind me like punctuation marks. I sat on the porch, flipping through pictures. Thomas and I in front of our first truck. David at 5, covered in chocolate cake. Lily at 8, missing a front tooth, waving from the end of the dock. I didn't cry. Grief is what you feel when something is taken from you. What I felt now was different. Recognition. They hadn't just pushed me out of a wedding. They had been slowly pushing me out of their lives for years. The wedding was simply the first time they did it with the lights on and an audience. On the 15th day, their flight landed. I didn't need an app to track it. I'd lived long enough to know how long a transatlantic trip takes, how slow baggage claim is, how the drive from the airport at rush hour feels. Around 8 in the evening, I sat in my armchair in fresh pajamas, a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside me, when the landline rang. Right on schedule. I let it ring once. Then I picked up. "Hello," I said gently, as if nothing in the world was wrong. What came through the receiver was not a greeting. It was a storm. "Mom, what the hell is this?" David shouted. "Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? There's an eviction notice on our door." Behind him, I could hear Olivia's shrill voice like a distant siren. "Tell her she can't do this. We have rights. Call the police." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The first act of the party they'd excluded me from was finally over. Now it was my turn to host. "Mom, what the hell is this? Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? There's an eviction notice on our door." David's voice came through the receiver so loud I had to hold the phone away for a second. Behind him, Olivia screeched something unintelligible, like a kettle boiled dry. "Tell her she can't do this. We have rights. Call someone." I let the storm rage for a few seconds, listening to my son panic over a piece of paper taped to a door he didn't pay for. "David," I said finally, my tone even. "Lower your voice. I'm old, not deaf." He sucked in a breath. "Mom, this is serious. There's a court stamp. 30 days? 30 days. What is this?" "It's exactly what it says," I replied. "A legal notice. You have 30 days to vacate my apartment." His voice cracked. "Mom, this is my home." "No," I corrected gently. "It's where you've been living. Your home is whatever you can pay for yourself." There was a beat of silence. I could picture him in the hallway, suitcase half unzipped, Olivia standing there with her arms folded, mascara smudged from travel and anger. "This is about the wedding," he said, forcing his tone to soften. I knew that voice. It was the one he used on clients. "Mom, it was a misunderstanding. There was a mix-up with the list." We were stressed, things were hectic. You know how those events are. No, David, I said. I know how those events are because I paid for all of them. I read every contract. I saw every guest list. There was no mix-up. Olivia's voice cut in, shrill and sugary at the same time. Helen, please, you're overreacting. The receptionist made an error. You know how staff can be. I almost laughed. The receptionist, I repeated. The young woman who looked at me with pure terror because she knew exactly who I was and what she'd been told to say. No, Olivia. The mistake wasn't hers. I could hear her breath catch. You stood next to my son, I continued quietly. You watched him tell me I wasn't on the list. You watched 200 people stare at me like I was a stranger. And you smiled. I remember that smile. It's the same one you wear in your photos when you think you've won. Helen, that's not fair, she protested. We love you. We just. You love my money, I cut in. Don't confuse the two. The line went silent again. I could almost hear the gears grinding in David's head, trying to shift tactics. Mom, he tried again, voice softer now, shaking at the edges. Okay, maybe we handled it badly. I'll admit that. I don't know, overwhelmed. But this. Paper rustled near the phone. Eviction. The car letter. The allowance suddenly stopping. You're punishing us. I took a slow sip of my tea before answering. I'm correcting something, I said. You blocked me at the door of a party I paid for. You told me I didn't belong there. I believed you. What does that even mean? It means I finally understood my place in your life. Not in the front row. Not in the photos. Not in the plans. Just in the background, quietly paying for everything. That's not true, he snapped. Isn't it? Yes. If I had stopped sending that allowance a year ago, would Olivia still call every week just to check in? If I refused to pay for Lily's gown, would you have invited me to the planning meetings, or just found another sponsor? He didn't answer, so I did it for him. You didn't want a mother, I said softly. You wanted a faucet you could turn on whenever you needed money. Now the faucet is closed. Olivia's composure slipped completely. You can't do this, she shrieked. We have children. Lily needs stability. We have a life. You have 40 years, I replied calmly. I had 72. You will survive 30 days. And Lily is an adult. She has a husband, a degree, and a passport. She just spent 2 weeks in Paris. She'll adjust. We'll sue you, David said suddenly, the threat coming out brittle, not strong. You can't just rip everything out from under us. You're not well. This is irrational. We can claim mental incapacity, get control of your assets. You can't just. Actually laughed. A short, tired sound. David, I said. I ran a logistics company for 10 years while your father was sick. I negotiated contracts you can't even understand. Last week I paid $5,000 for a full mental evaluation from a forensic psychiatrist. Pages. Signed, sealed, and on file with the court. Marcus has a copy. Any judge you talk to will see exactly what this is. A grown man trying to declare his mother crazy because she finally stopped funding his life. His breath hitched. You paid for an evaluation. Yes, I said. The confused old woman anticipated her clever son. I told you. I stopped being naive the night you told me my name wasn't on the list. On the other end of the line, chaos erupted. This is unbelievable, Olivia raged. You're ruining us. David, she's overreacting, tell her. Quiet, he snapped, voice frayed. For a moment he sounded like a little boy again. The boy who dropped a glass and heard it shatter, waiting to see if he'd be yelled at or forgiven. Mom, he said, and now his voice shook. Where is this coming from? Or family? You can't just turn on us. Closed my eyes. That's the difference between us, I said quietly. You turned on me because it was easy. I turned off the money because it was necessary. He drew in a ragged breath. What about the car? He asked. The letter says it has to be returned. That's my car. I need it for work. It's my car, I corrected. Registered, insured, and taxed in my name. I allowed you to drive it. Now I no longer do. You work in advertising, David. Advertise yourself to a bus schedule. Helen, Olivia snapped. This is cruel. What you did at the estate gate was cruel, I replied. This is accounting. For a moment no one spoke. Then he tried one last thing. What about Lily? He whispered. This will destroy her. She loves you. She's devastated. Don't do this to her. Lily had a front row seat, I said. She watched me be turned away. She posed for photographs while her grandmother took a cab home alone. She had 15 days in Paris to call and ask if I was all right. I didn't. I'm not doing this to her. I'm letting her live exactly the life she chose. The line crackled with static, or maybe just their breathing. David, I finished, voice soft but firm. You told me, in front of 200 people, that I wasn't on the list. Tonight I'm telling you this. You're not on mine. You have 30 days to move out. The car must be returned within the week. The allowance is finished. And before you ask. No, I am not changing my mind. He sounded suddenly much younger. Mom, please, he whispered. We can fix this. No, I said. You can learn from it. You're really doing this, he said, disbelieving. Yes. A long silence stretched between us. The kind that used to make him squirm as a child, when he was caught lying about broken windows or missing cookies. Back then, he would eventually confess. This time he just breathed. You'll regret this, Olivia spat finally. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I regretted raising a son who thought his mother's value depended on whether she ruined his photographs, I answered. I regretted staying quiet so long. I glanced at the eviction notice lying on my coffee table, at the blue folder of deeds and contracts beside it. This I won't regret. The next morning, the winter sun pushed through my curtains like nothing had changed. Everything had. I brewed my coffee the way Robert liked it, strong enough, he used to say, to wake the dead and bankrupt the banks. The irony made me smile. For the first time in years, I poured a single cup, sat at the table, and didn't check my calendar for anyone else's needs. No transfers to approve. No payments to cover. No calls to return. Just silence and the ticking of the kitchen clock. Around 10 a.m. my old cell phone buzzed. It was the one David knew, the one they always used when they needed something. Text popped up. David, Mom, the allowance didn't come in today. Everything okay? Maybe the bank made a mistake. Not how are you? Not we're sorry about last night. Just, where's the money? I watched the words for a long moment, then quietly pressed delete. The message vanished. So did the last crumbs of guilt. While they spent the day in a panic, I did something that would have horrified Susan. I went back to school. At 2 p.m., I sat in a bright classroom downtown, surrounded by people half my age, as a young woman named Emily showed me how to create folders on my new laptop. You pick the name, she said, sliding the mouse toward me. I typed carefully, my life. Perfect, Emily said. Now drag anything important in there. Bank files, contracts, investments. She had no idea what those words meant in my world. That afternoon, I moved almost everything from the old account David knew into a new online bank, one he'd never heard of. I transferred stock portfolios, long-term bonds, even the rent from the warehouses I still owned. I left exactly $1,000 sitting in the account with his name on the trusted contact form. Just enough to be petty. That night, I slept 8 uninterrupted hours for the first time in months. While I rested, their world started to crack. Later, my neighbor Mrs. Patel filled in the details with unrestrained delight. It began with Olivia's favorite activity: shopping. They were still in Paris when the allowance stopped. She was standing at a counter under golden lights, a designer scarf draped over her arm like a trophy. The saleswoman swiped her card once, frowned, and tried again. "I'm sorry, madam," she said. "The transaction is declined." Olivia laughed, tossing her hair. "Impossible. Run it again. My mother-in-law is very generous." 3 swipes. 3 red screens. According to Mrs. Patel's niece who worked in banking, the scene was pathetic. Raised voice, frantic phone calls, David whispering, "Try a different card." Each attempt failed. For the first time since she married him, Olivia realized that "we're comfortable" meant my mother pays for everything. Back in New York, the first of the month arrived like it always did. Only this time my money stayed with me. On day 3 after their return, my landline rang again and again and again. I let it scream into the empty house. By day 5 Marcus called, sounding almost cheerful. "Helen, you've caused a small earthquake," he said. "Just got off the phone with another attorney. Seems David and Olivia hired him to mediate a misunderstanding." I watered my plants, the winter light soft on the leaves. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. "That there is no misunderstanding," Marcus replied. "Just a very clear property owner reclaiming what's hers." I also mentioned gently that any attempt to challenge your capacity would collide with 8 pages of psychiatric evaluation. "You enjoyed that," I said. "A little," he admitted. "And the paperwork. The eviction filing is in motion. They've signed for the notice. The letter for the car was delivered this morning. The beach house locks were changed yesterday. Security installed. Cameras too." I breathed out slowly. "Good," I said. "Send me all the invoices. I want every cost related to cleaning up this mess in my name, not theirs." "Already on your desk," he replied. After we hung up, I went to the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. The pink dress still lay in a heap on the chair where I'd thrown it after the wedding. Smelled like perfume and foolishness. I picked it up, ran my fingers along the silk one last time, then tore the seam straight down the middle. The sound was sharp, satisfying. I ripped until it was nothing but strips and dropped them into a trash bag. That dress had been bought for a fantasy. Of being wanted, of being part of their celebration. I was done dressing up for other people's illusions. A week passed. I got a shorter haircut. I bought comfortable walking shoes instead of heels no one ever saw. I took myself to lunch and paid with my own card, my own money, with no one standing beside me pretending it was theirs. On the 14th day, a Saturday, I drove out to the beach house for the first time in years. Marcus had given me the new keys. The security system recognized my code. When the door swung open, the air was clean and still. No scattered flip-flops in the hallway. No sticky glasses on the counter. No smell of Olivia's harsh floral candles. Just the faint scent of salt and the memory of Robert's laughter. I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the cool glass of framed photos, the door frame where we had once drawn David's height with penciled lines. For a moment my throat tightened. "I'm sorry," I whispered to Robert's absent presence. "I should have been stronger sooner." But as I stepped out onto the porch and looked at the ocean, the guilt loosened its grip. "I got there," I corrected myself. "Late, but I got there." I slept in the master bedroom that night with the window cracked open, the sound of waves washing away the last echoes of the wedding musicians. When I drove back to the city Sunday afternoon, the sky was pale and clear. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a plane was carrying my son and his wife home to a life they no longer owned. Matey. I put on my softest pajamas. And I waited. The plane from Paris landed around 5 p.m. Add customs, baggage and traffic, and I knew roughly when they'd reach the building. At 8:12 the phone rang. I let it ring 4 times before lifting the receiver. "Hello, Mom." David's voice was tight, breathless. "Tell me this is a mistake." "I told you last week," I said. "I'm done making mistakes. There's a notice taped to our door. A dormum. With your name in it. Says we have 30 days to leave." 30 days. Where are we supposed to go? I glanced at the clock. "I'm sure the same way you found a wedding planner who could spend $100,000, I replied. "You can find a landlord willing to rent to 2 adults. "You don't understand," Olivia screeched in the background. "We have expenses. We have an image. People will adjust," I said. "So will you." "We came home to nothing," David pushed on. The car letter, the account balance, the eviction notice. It's like you've erased us. No, I answered. I've erased your access. You are very much still there. You're just standing on your own 2 feet now. He tried one more time, softer, desperate. Mom, just talk to us. Face to face. Let us come up. We can explain. We can apologize. You can talk to Marcus, I said. He has all the legal terms. As for apologies, you had your chance at the estate gate. You chose silence then. I'm returning the favor. You're going to regret this, he whispered. For the first time I felt nothing but an odd, calm sympathy. Maybe, I said. But I already regretted something much worse. Raising a son who thought his mother's worth could be crossed off a guest list. Helen, please, Olivia begged. Think of Lily. She's devastated. She can call me, I said. She hasn't yet. David exhaled like someone punched him. This isn't you, he said, almost pleading. You're not like this. You're kind, you're generous. I am, I agreed. Just not to people who treat me like an ATM with wrinkles. There was one more silence. This one different. Heavy. Real. Then I spoke for the last time. You threw me out of a celebration I built, I said quietly. Consider this balance. You have 30 days, David. Use them wisely. Good night. I hung up and, without letting myself linger in second thoughts, pulled the phone cord from the wall. The ticking clock grew louder in the stillness. 30 days for them. Whole new life for me. I stood at the window and watched the city lights come on one by one, each small bright square a different story. For 72 years, I had been a side character in my own. It was time to take the lead. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen table like nothing was wrong with the world. Something was very right with mine. I brewed coffee, opened my new laptop, and practiced the Excel formulas Emily had taught me. Some filter pivot tables. My fingers moved slow but sure across the keyboard. While I was learning how to track investments, my son was discovering what life looked like without my money. By 10 a.m. my old phone, the one they still knew, buzzed to life on the counter. 37 messages overnight. I didn't open them. I just watched the list scroll. David, the bank says the allowance was cancelled. Is everything okay? Olivia, we're in trouble here. Call us back now. David, Mom, this is childish. Stop this and we'll talk. Olivia, if anything happens to us, it'll be your fault. Not one, we're sorry. Not one, how are you? Delete, delete, delete. I put on my coat, grabbed my new laptop and went to class. While I was learning how to color code cells, David decided to prove he was still in control. I heard about it later from Mr. Singh, the security guard, and Mrs. Patel, who somehow knows everything before the newspapers do. David came down to the garage in the same expensive suit he'd worn to my humiliation. Tie perfect, hair perfect, expression carefully put together. He clicked the car key. The lights blinked. He slid behind the wheel of the gray sedan he always called my car. He pulled up to the metal gate and waved at the guard booth. Morning, George. Open up. I'm running late. George stepped out, the printed memo from building management in his hand, the one Marcus had arranged. I'm afraid I can't do that, sir, George said, voice apologetic but firm. David's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Open the gate. The owner of this vehicle, Mrs. Helen Ward, has placed it on a restricted list, George explained. We've been notified that the car is to be reclaimed. I am not allowed to let it leave the premises without her written authorization. That's insane, David snapped. It's my car. George glanced down at the paper again. The registration, insurance, and title are all in Mrs. Ward's name. If you attempt to drive it out, I'm required to call the police and report a possible theft. Upstairs, I was learning conditional formatting. Downstairs, my son was being told the truth in front of half the building. According to Mrs. Patel, whose dog just happened to need a walk at that exact moment, Olivia was standing beside the car, shouting about that crazy old woman and accusing George of being my puppet. David's face went the color of spoiled milk. In the end, he unbuckled the child's seat for my grandson, the one I'd bought, yanked it out, slammed the car door, and stormed off to call a taxi while half a dozen neighbors pretended not to watch. That was consequence number 1. Public humiliation just like mine. Only his audience was smaller. Now, consequence number 2 arrived in the afternoon. Olivia, hungry and nervous, opened her food delivery app. Her usual order, sushi, extra avocado, totaled more than some families spent in a week. She tapped pay. Declined. She tried another card. Declined. Tried David's. Declined again. The $4,000 allowance had never been a bonus. It had been their lifeline. I poured myself tea and watched a tutorial on stock analysis. If the universe had a sense of humor, it was finally showing it. Around 5 p.m., as I returned from my class with my laptop bag over my shoulder, I saw them. David and Olivia were standing right outside the front entrance of my building, looking like 2 soaked cats caught in the rain. Shell-shocked, angry, exhausted. Olivia's mascara had carved dark lines beneath her eyes. David's suit looked slept in. "Mom!" he shouted the second he saw me. Finally! Patrick, the doorman, straightened, ready to intervene, but I raised a hand. I didn't need protection. "What a surprise," I said calmly. "You look different." "Open the door," David demanded. "We need to talk." "You're talking now," I replied. "And you're not coming inside." "You can't do this," he snapped. "I live here. I've lived here for 10 years. "No," I corrected gently. "You've stayed here for 10 years. For free." "There's a difference." Olivia stepped forward, voice trembling with rehearsed fragility. "Mrs. Ward, please," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "We made a mistake. We were under stress. The receptionist messed up the list." "Olivia," I cut in, "you were the one holding the list. You were the one who watched my son block me at the door." You smirked. "I remember it perfectly." Her mouth closed with an audible click. David bristled. "This is crazy. You're overreacting over one misunderstanding. You're throwing your own family into the street. You're clearly not thinking straight, Mom. Talk to a lawyer. We can contest this. If we prove you're not mentally." I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled all 3 of them, including Patrick. "Not mentally what?" "Yes. Capable. Competent. You really want to go down that road, David?" He swallowed but didn't back down. "If we have to." "All right," I said. "Let me show you something." I set my laptop bag down, reached into my purse and pulled out my new smartphone. "The one Susan, sorry Olivia, said would be too complicated for me," I added. I opened my banking app with a practice swipe and turned the screen toward him. "See this?" "Yes. That's my portfolio. Stocks, bonds, cash accounts. The scheduled transfers. The account changes. All done by me. Last week, I paid $5,000 for a full psychiatric evaluation at a forensic clinic. Pages. Signed by a specialist. Marcus has the report. I'm as sane as I've ever been." David's bravado flickered. "Any judge," I continued, lowering the phone, "will be able to tell very quickly who's confused and who's manipulating whom." Olivia's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You're wasting money on doctors and lawyers while your family suffers." "No," I said. "I'm investing in protection from my family." I turned back to David. "You think the apartment you've been living in is yours? It's mine. You think that car is yours? Also mine. You think the monthly allowance was some big sacrifice on my part? David, that was pocket change." He stared at me, stunned. For the first time in years, actually listening. "You thought I sold your father's company and lived off whatever crumbs were left," I went on. "You were wrong. I sold the trucks, the contracts, name. I kept the warehouses. 6 of them. 1 leases to a shipping giant. 1 to a pharmaceutical firm. 1 to a distribution center. Do you know how much rent that brings in every month?" He said nothing. "Of course you don't," I answered for him. "Because you never asked. You never wondered how I could pay for your daughter's college, your credit card emergencies, and $100,000 wedding without blinking. Olivia's face went slack. The pink dress I wore to your spectacle. I added. That cost me more than you've seen, but less than a week's rent on one building. You humiliated a woman who could have bought and sold your entire life without looking up from her checkbook. They both stood there, silent, stripped of illusion. You two treated me like a leaking faucet, I said softly. Always running, always there. You forgot I was the one who built the pipes. I turned to Patrick. Please call security, I said calmly. These two are no longer welcome on the property without an appointment. Wait, Mom, David blurted, stepping forward in panic. You can't just cut us out. We're family. I met his eyes. You closed that door at Lily's wedding, I replied. All I did was lock it. He reached for my arm like a child again. I stepped back. And don't call me Mom in the middle of a tantrum, I added quietly. You lost that privilege at the gate. For a second, I saw something raw in his face. Fear. Maybe the first honest emotion he'd shown me in years. But fear, I'd learned, wasn't the same as love. I have an Italian class, I said, picking up my laptop bag. I'm late. I nodded once to Patrick, then walked through the glass doors. They closed behind me with a soft hiss. I did not look back. As the elevator rose, my phone, the new one, the one David didn't know about, buzzed in my coat pocket. Unknown number. Answered. Hello. Grandma. It's me. Lily. Her voice shook. For the first time that day, my heart did too. Lily, I said evenly. How was Paris? Was the wedding you let me pay for as beautiful as you'd hoped? She broke into quiet sobs. Grandma, what's happening? Mom and Dad said you've lost your mind. That you're kicking them out. That you took everything. I leaned against the elevator wall and closed my eyes. I haven't lost my mind, Lily, I replied softly. I finally found it. The doors slid open to my floor. And for the first time in a long time, I stepped into my apartment as a woman who knew exactly who she was. I haven't lost my mind, Lily, I said, pressing the phone a little closer to my ear. I finally found it. On the other end of the line, my granddaughter sniffled. Grandma, Dad says you're sick. That the lawyer's taking advantage of you. That you're listening to the wrong people. Wrong people. For 35 years, the only wrong people had been my son and his wife. I walked slowly into the living room and sat down, looking at the empty spot on the wall where their family photo had once hung. Lily, I said quietly, how was your wedding? There was a pause. I could almost hear her heart tighten. It was beautiful, she whispered. The venue, the music, the dress. Everything was perfect. Perfect, I repeated. And did you notice anything missing? Another pause. Longer. I don't know what you mean. Did you notice, I asked gently, that the woman who raised your father, who watched you take your first steps, who paid for that dress you loved so much, wasn't there? Her breathing hitched. Grandma, it all happened so fast, she rushed out. I was nervous, I was getting my makeup done, the photographer was calling me, the coordinator was. And when your father blocked me at the entrance, I interrupted softly, in front of 200 people, when he told me I wasn't on the list. Where were you? I didn't see, she whispered. I swear I didn't see. You saw the photos afterward, I replied. You saw I wasn't in a single one. You went to Paris for 15 days. Did you ever stop to ask? Where was Grandma? Silence. Did you call? Press. Once. Just once to ask if I was okay. I heard a quiet sob. No, she whispered. I didn't. I was afraid, Grandma. Mom said you'd make a scene. She said you'd guilt trip us. She said you'd ruin everything. And you believed her. I didn't want to fight with them on my wedding day, she cried. I thought we'd talk afterward. You thought there would always be a later, I finished for her. Later to ask questions. Later to apologize. Later to care. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Look at your own choices, Lily, I said quietly. You let your fear of an argument weigh more than your love for your grandmother. That's not true, she protested, voice cracking. I love you, Grandma. I always have. Love is not what you feel when things are easy, I replied. Love is what you do when it costs you something. Her crying deepened. She was still so young, I reminded myself. The anger I felt toward my son didn't rest as heavily on her shoulders. But pain is pain, even when it comes from people who don't fully understand what they're doing. Is this all because I didn't call? She choked out. Because I didn't stand up for you? No, I said calmly. This is because your parents took my money, took my kindness, took my presents, and then decided I wasn't good enough for their picture. They treated me like I was disposable. You didn't throw me out, Lily. But you watched them live like I didn't exist. A long, shaking breath crawled through the line. What's going to happen to them? She whispered. They have 30 days to move out of my apartment, I replied. The car is gone. The monthly allowance is gone. The beach house is no longer theirs to pose in for photos. They're furious, she muttered. Mom says you're vindictive. Dad says you're punishing them. I'm not punishing them, I said. I'm just stopping the reward for their behavior. I don't know what to do, Lily sobbed. They're miserable. They're terrified. They keep saying you'll come to your senses. That you can't live without us. I almost smiled. That, I said, is the funny part. They really believe I need them more than they've ever needed me. She sniffled again. Grandma, will you ever forgive us? Forgiveness and access, I replied, are two different things. She went quiet. I don't hate you, Lily, I continued softly. I'm not even angry at you the way I am at them. But right now I need distance. I need space from all of you. I need to live one day of my life where I am not just the wallet or the background old lady in someone else's story. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You lost me, I said gently. The moment you decided the party mattered more than the person who paid for it. Her breath caught again. I could hear her breaking, and somewhere inside a part of me broke too. But I'd promised myself something. I would not trade my dignity for anyone's comfort again. Not even for my granddaughter's tears. I'm hanging up now, Lily, I said softly. I hope that one day when you're older you'll understand why. Grandma, please. I love you, I said. But I love myself now too. And I ended the call. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. Not empty. Not bitter. Just quiet in a new way. Marcus kept me updated. Notice is served, he reported over the phone 3 days later. Eviction is in motion. The car is legally reclaimed. The beach house locks are changed. They tried to stop the car tow, by the way. The towing company sent me a photo. It looked theatrical. I pictured Olivia screaming in a parking garage and almost laughed. And the lawsuit? Yes. They spoke to a lawyer, Marcus said, amusement in his voice. Tried the elder abuse angle. Claimed you were giving away assets under duress. My colleague asked them 2 questions. 1. Who's been paying your bills for the last decade? And 2. Do you have any medical proof she's incompetent? They went quiet. I poured myself coffee, feeling lighter than I had in years. You know what's interesting? Marcus added. Every time I talk to you, you sound clearer. Sharper. I've been doing homework, I told him. Excel, banking apps, investment webinars. Turns out my brain still works. He laughed. It always did, Helen. You just spent too many years using it for everyone else's benefit. I redecorated my life, one small decision at a time. The apartment changed first. The pink dress that had witnessed my worst humiliation stayed on the floor for 2 days. Then one morning I picked it up, cut it into strips with my sewing scissors, and dropped it into a trash bag. Not as an act of rage. As an act of removal. I took down the framed photo from last Christmas. Me on the end of the sofa, David and Olivia in the center, Lily leaning toward them like the sun rose in their smiles. I replaced it with an older photo, Tom and me standing in front of the first warehouse, both of us in cheap jeans. His arm smudged with grease, my hair pulled back in a messy bun. We looked exhausted. We also looked alive. "Welcome back," I whispered to that younger version of myself. The guest room changed too. Their room became just a room again. I stripped the bed, folded the ridiculously expensive sheets Olivia had insisted on, and donated them. I opened the closet and packed up the perfume samples, the forgotten scarves, the clutter they'd left behind like careless monarchs. By the end of the day, the whole space felt neutral, ready for whoever I chose to welcome next. Or for no one at all. The first of the month came around. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., brewed strong coffee, and sat by the window with my phone in my hand. At 7:15, David's allowance would normally slide out of my account, invisible and automatic. 7:16, nothing happened. In some overpriced cafe across the ocean, I imagined Olivia handing over a card with a bright smile, only to watch the waiter's expression change. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I imagined him saying. "Your card was declined." By 8 p.m. that evening, the first message hit my old phone. "David, Mom, something went wrong with the transfer. Can you check?" Not "How are you?" Not "I'm sorry. Can you check?" Delete. While their world tilted, mine expanded. I signed up for an Italian course at the community center. The teacher, a tall man with laugh lines around his eyes, introduced himself as Lorenzo. "Buongiorno, Signora Ward," he said, after I brought him a slice of lemon cake on the second day. "Your accent is better than half my class." "Flattery will make me bake more," I warned him. "Then by all means, I am dazzled," he replied. I laughed. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't have to twist around someone else's comfort first. On Saturdays, I drove out to the small piece of land I'd bought near the outskirts of the city. Trucks came and went, bringing concrete, tools, supplies. The sign at the front read, "Hope Haven Animal Shelter. Coming soon." Tom and I had once dreamed about it in whispers, then work, then life, then grief got in the way. Now, instead of funding my son's vanity, my money was building something that wagged its tail when I arrived. At night, the apartment no longer felt like a waiting room between calls from my son. Felt like mine. 30 days passed. On the last day, at exactly 5 p.m., a courier rang my bell. "Delivery for Mrs. Ward," he said, holding out a small brown envelope. Inside were 3 keys on separate rings. The apartment, the garage, the beach house. No note. No apology. Just surrender. I held them in my hand, the metal cool against my skin, and realized something. This didn't feel like revenge. Felt like recovery. My phone buzzed that night with a call from Marcus. "They've moved out," he said. The building manager confirmed. No damage beyond a few scuffs and a broken lamp. All easily replaced. "And the car?" "Yes. Back in your garage, waiting for its rightful owner," he said. "I assume that's still you." "For now," I answered. "Maybe someday I'll sell it and buy something smaller. Less symbolic." He chuckled. "You know, Helen, what you've done. Most people talk about it their whole lives but never act. You drew a line." "I drew it too late," I said quietly. "Maybe," he replied. "But you drew it while you were still standing." After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and stood at the window, watching the city lights blink on. I didn't cry. I didn't smile.